CSIS 2440 is filmed before a live studio audience.
So you can see the title here, More Event Listeners. We're going to pick up kind of where we left off with the robot the other day. We're not going to get into the robot, but we're going to use the same technique, which is event listeners, okay? So what we want to do, you have a homework assignment coming up that requires, you've seen these like forms where you have to put your password in, then you have to confirm that it's the right password, and if they don't match, then you can't get in. So we want to be able to do that in real time though, while as they're typing, it gives them feedback while they're typing, right? So we're going to start simple and just make a form and see if we can capture the input and do something with it live. So the standard old, make a form method is just, we'll make it post. All right, so here we go. We have a nice simple little form here. Let's just look at it. All right, so more events. And there we go. Not just two little fields here. What I want to do is while I'm typing, I want to display the content on the page somewhere else. Just somehow prove that I'm actually getting the data real time and live, right? So let's just put a paragraph right above, and we'll give this an ID of phone in, and we'll make another one for email in or something like that. And then we want to attach, remember the other day we did an event listener, but we attached it to the whole window, right? So no matter where you're at, if you're pushing a key anywhere, it picked it up, okay? Well, this time we're going to just attach it only to those two fields. We can give them their own event listener, right? So if we come in here, we can just do get these things. They were ID, phone, and email. So we can say document.get element by ID phone, and then get that element, and on it add an event listener, right? And you remember what the two parameters were? Yeah, the event that you're looking for, which will go here, and then the actual name of the function. So we'll just call it validate or something like that, okay? So the event we're looking for, we can go with key up or key down again, like we did before, but there's another event that's actually called input, right? So we can actually do that, which will be as the user's putting input. Let's start with one that we know though, key up. That's what we used the other day, right? So whenever they release the key, then something will happen. Okay. So we also need to do the same thing, attach one of those to the email, right? And that's it. And then we just want to write the validate function. So this will be a simple function to start with, just to get our feet wet here. Validate, and we will capture the event. And all I want to do is just print out whatever they're typing. So I want to change the inner HTML or the inner text of those guys to be whatever they're typing in. Does that make sense? So it's just real-time copying what they're doing. It's not useful, but it's just showing us that it's working. So all I got to do here is just document dot, get the, whoa, what is that? Get element, PIN, and set its inner text to this thing right here, right? The value of that. So because we're going to be using this over and over again, let's make it into a variable. So we'll say let phone equal that, and then we'll add the event listener to phone. See what I'm doing there? Yeah. And then we'll do the same thing here. Let email equal that, and we'll add the event listener to the email. So let the inner text equal the phone value. Right? Because the phone, this thing here, is this whole thing here. And the value is whatever the user types in. We do the exact same thing for the email input and email value. Right? Super easy. All right, now when I refresh it, I type in a number here, hopefully, you can see right above it, it's copying what I'm doing, right? And then when I type an email, it'll also copy that. So that's all I want to do is just test to make sure that I'm actually capturing the input real time, like live as we go, okay? Well, what we want to do is maybe validate it as we go, like actually validate it. Say, oh, this is a valid phone number or this isn't a valid phone number, right? So how do we do that? Yes, our favorite little buddy regular expression, right? And I'm not going to bother trying to recreate the regular expression. I've already got them right here. I'm just going to copy them right here, okay? So this one will validate phone numbers, and this one will validate emails. And these are already in the lecture notes. You can just copy them if you want. All right, let's start off by making a couple variables here. We'll do let phone expression equal that. Now notice something here. Remember in PHP, when you used regular expression, you had to put those extra slashes on it and everything to escape it. You had to put it in quotes. Look at this, there's nothing. It just goes right there raw like that. Yeah, it's just simple, right? And then put the semicolon, of course. And then we'll do the same thing with let e expression. That's kind of a weird variable, but it'll be this right here. That'll equal that. Okay, big, long, nasty regular expression that will validate for emails. Okay, so what we want to do is compare what comes in with these things here and see if they're valid or not. So there's actually a function that's built in to strings where you can compare them, okay? So this is called test, I believe is what it's called, okay? And when you apply test to a string, it will automatically compare regular expression, okay? So let's just start with the phone, right? Let's just do the phone. Let's just ignore the email for just a minute. And what we want to do is basically say if this phone dot test, okay? Test is a built-in regular expression function. And so it will compare whatever I put in the parentheses, which is going to be this, with the pattern, right? It's a little tricky to wrap your head around that because nowhere does it look like regular expression is occurring here, right? But what this is, if you have a variable that is regular expression and you attach or you call this method here called test, it will take the regular expression and compare this to see if the pattern matches, okay? Okay, so now that we have this statement here, this is going to return true or false. Well, if it's true, we want to say valid. If it's false, we want to say invalid, right? So we could just use our buddy, the ternary operator for that instead. So what I can do is say that the inner text right here of the phone is equal to, using the ternary operator here, we can say this, when it's true, we'll say valid, right? And when it's not true, we'll say invalid. And that's it. So this will return true or false, and when it returns true, we'll say valid, and when it doesn't, we just say invalid. So we set the inner text to whatever that evaluates to. Simple enough. Refresh it, and let's see if it works. So I start typing 9, and it's saying invalid because that is an invalid number. 9, 9, and I eventually, hopefully, when I hit this last 9, it should go valid. Poof. Magic, right? So real-time JavaScript validation. Now, this isn't validating anything, right? It's just showing me, it's giving me a message. I still need to prevent the user from pushing the submit button or something like that, right? We'll get there, slowly but surely. Now let's do the same thing with email. Okay, so with the email, it's basically the same thing, right? We just can pretty much copy this line right here, right? Except for change a few things here. The email and the email expression, and that's basically it, right? So we're going to get the element by ID, the EIN, which is the paragraph, and then set its inner text to whatever this evaluates to, true, to valid or invalid. And so now this is going to be a little bit weird. As I start typing in my phone, both of my messages are showing up, right? Because I'm doing it on the key press, right? That's okay though for now. And yeah, we'll fix that in a second. So, but let's get a valid number, then get over here, and as long as we have an at something dot 2 letters, then we're valid. Even if .cd is not a thing, it's a valid style. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's clean it up a little bit here, because just saying valid or invalid is not very clear. So what I like to do is something like this. We'll start off by saying your email or phone, we'll change it in a minute, is concatenate. And then in here, I'm not going to do anything if it's valid. If it's invalid, I'm going to say the word not. Is not. And then outside of it, outside of it, I'll just put valid, right? That's a little bit better error message. And of course, this should say phone. But now it's a little bit cleaner error message for the user. So let's refresh it here. And we start typing. And your phone is not valid, your email is not valid. Now your phone is valid. And your email is valid, right? Nice, okay? Let's do one other thing to it to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and that's put a little bit of CSS on it. And this is how I actually do this in the real world. I use this exact style. So we'll just start with paragraphs in general, and we'll give them a border radius of 5 pixels, so we'll have rounded corners, and we'll make them margin 10, auto, width of like 75%, and padding like 5 pixels. And then we change the color. I'll have a class called valid, and I make the background color RGBA, and it'll be green if it's valid, so 0 to 55, 0, and a little bit of transparency on it. And to do the same thing for invalid, except we'll make it red, so it's a nice warning color, right? So that's 255 and 0. So there we go. Now all I have to do is apply this class name to the paragraph in real time, right? So again, right here on line 13 or 14, we could do that. We can use the ternary operation again if we want to, right? We could say something like this. Let's just grab this little statement here again. And we can say that, let's see, this guy right here, that's the paragraph, right? So we're going to be using this a couple of times, so I'm going to turn that into a variable like we did a minute ago. So we'll just say let EIN equal that and PIN equal that. And then we'll say semicolon there and pin.inner text. That shouldn't be there. All right, so this variable, we're going to move this a little bit further up here, and we're going to do the same thing right here. I should have done this to start with, but it's just a little bit cleaner when you have it this way. All right, so now that we have this, now we can do what I was going to do, which is take this expression here again and make another ternary operation. Okay, this time what we'll do is say that pin.className is equal to, if that's true, the class name will be valid. If it's false, the class name will be invalid. Right? Does that make sense? Simple idea here, and we could do the exact same thing for the email. Just change the little few variables here. So now this will give us nice little color highlighting so we know for sure. And here we go, 9, and now it's clearly saying those are not valid, right? And then eventually your phone is valid and at something.com, right? So it's pretty straightforward, and maybe I'm overusing the ternary operator, but I like it. It's fun, it's simple. This could have been maybe better done as a switch statement or an if statement or whatever, but it works, okay? Okay, so this is a pretty good start. We got it all styled up and everything, but there is a little problem here. And the problem is, let's refresh it and you'll see it again. The problem is, the second I start typing from my phone, I start getting error messages about my email. right? That's no good. Why is it, the user's thinking, why are you telling me my email's valid? I haven't even typed my email yet. Leave me alone. Wait till I start typing it to tell me, okay? So we can actually deal with that in our code here. But this is a little trickier than you might think, because how do we know which object fired the event? How do we know that the user typed in the phone or the email? How do we know which field they're in? That's not an easy question to answer. Well, so what we can do to figure this out, whenever you're in doubt with stuff like this, look in the DOM, right? That's like my mantra, go to the DOM, to the DOM. And in this case, we know that some event is firing, right? A key event is firing. So we can actually listen for the event and console it out. I mean, we already are calling this function when it happens. Let's console the event out. So the event is automatically, again, it's just an object that magically exists when you do an event. Right, so again, the idea here is we want to look at the event to see what happened. So let's console out the event here. This event occurs when they push a button, or when they release the button, key up. And so the moment the validate function fires, let's go ahead and console out that event and see if there's any kind of clue in there that can help us figure out what to do here. So let's open up the console and then refresh. And the moment I start typing, we'll see the event over here. And so here is the event. So let's look at it and see what's in there. Okay. One thing it tells us, the key we pushed was F. That's nice. The key code for F is 7. Okay. Is there anything else that's useful in here that you can see that might help us to know what field we're in? Yeah, okay, so path, maybe. Path has this right here. Also, look at this source element right here. Yeah, source element says that the phone ID is what triggered the event, right? Source element. So the source element is just, so in other words, if I go here and I push another button inside of email, we get another event down here, and I go down to source of element and saying that it was email that fired the event. So that source element tells us what fired the event, okay? So now I have something that I can do an if statement on, right? So come up here, and again, it was called source element. So we can get rid of that console now. And let's make another variable here, and we'll say let element, whatever, equal the event dot source. Okay. So now we have this variable here, that's the source element, and now I can ask the question, if it was the phone, do one thing, otherwise do the other thing, right? And let's just look at this extended a little bit to see if there's more information in here that could be useful to us. It doesn't really look like it. So I'm going to assume that we can just simply say if it equals that, right? So right here, I'm just going to say if element is equal to input, phone, then we're going to do the phone stuff, which is this thing right here. So let's put some curly braces. And it's also, this is the other phone thing that we do, right? So those are the two phone things. Close out the curly braces. And now we don't want to do an else, we want to do an else if, right? So let's get, yep. So there's the two email things. We'll say else if element is equal to input email. Do those two things. And now the reason we want to do an else if is in case we have 3 or 4 different fields, right? Okay. So this should be a little bit better. Refresh it. See if we get any console errors. Doesn't look like it. So I start typing phone, and we have an issue. Okay. So let's console out this and see what it shows us. Okay. So console.log event element. I have a feeling we're going to need to say something like value or whatever at the end of it, but let's just look. So right now nothing happened, which tells me that this thing did not equal one of these things, right? So I want to see what exactly this thing prints out. So let's just test that, refresh. I start typing, and oh, see, look at that. It's just printing out the entire object. You see that? So this is actually the input object itself. Does that make sense? Okay, so if that's the case, then what I need to do is look at its ID, right? Yeah, so let's set element equal to the event.sourceElement dot attributes array, the idth element, and that node value of that. You remember that little trick? Right, so let's look at that closely, okay? So we just consoled out on line 15 here what this thing, just source element, is. Well, source element is literally just that, right? Yeah, it's the whole object there. So if we come over here and look at that object specifically, right here, I'm clicking on it, and then I come down to properties, and I expand here. We go down, there is an attributes array right here that holds as the 0th element the ID, as the 1 element the placeholder, and as the 2nd element type, which if you look at our code, 0th element, the 1 element, the 2 element, right? If I added something else here, you're like class equals chicken, yeah, that'll be the 3rd thing in there. So I refresh and expand it again, and you'll see when we get down the attributes array, there it is, the 3rd thing's class, right? And so it's in that order too. The order it shows up in the HTML is the order it'll be here. So we want to get a hold of the ID right here, right? Set the element equal to the 0th element is the ID, right? Well, we want the 0th element, and if we scroll down underneath that, you'll see this node value right here is phone, right? So the 0th element is node value is phone. So now we just want to compare to see if it equals phone or email, right? And the 0th element, that's fine and that will work. But what if for some reason I put the class in the front or something like that, right? Then class becomes the 0th element. So that's why rather than calling it by its number, we call it by its value, its key, right, which is the ID, okay? So now we're saying let element, maybe better thing would be element ID, right? That's probably a better name. Let the ID equal that, right? And so we can get rid of line 15 now. So I'm saying let this variable called element ID equal the event source element, which is the actual whole input tag. Look at its idth element in the attributes array and grab the node value, which will either be phone or email, right? A little messy, but should work now. Refresh, go to the console, make sure I don't have any errors. And if I type phone, notice here only now I'm getting an error message about my phone. It's not until I start typing email that I get the message there. Much better user experience, right? Okay, how do we feel about that? Groovy. Oh, sure, yeah. So if we refresh it, close that refresh. Uh-oh, something's happening. There we go. And start typing email first, then only the email message shows up, right? Yeah, very good. And then when I get over here, then things show up over there. Okay, other questions? So we're going to actually do the thing that's required for your homework, which is compare two fields with each other and make a decision based on that. So now I'm going to delete everything. We're going to keep this function called validate, but we won't need any regular expression for it. And then over here, we're going to have a password field. We'll call it password. And its type is password. Actually, I'm going to leave it as text so we can see what I'm typing, but normally you'd want to make it password. Okay? And this one is called confirm password or something like that, right? And so here we're going to say enter password, and here we say confirm. Confirm. Okay, so we got this. It's pretty simple. We don't need those paragraphs anymore. Actually, we will need one, right? Just one paragraph, and we'll call this the message. That's going to be telling you they match or they don't match, okay? And we'll be applying the same CSS here to be red or green if they match or don't match. Okay, so here's our basic form. Let's go look at it in the browser right here. More events 2. There we go. So enter your password. Nothing's going to happen at the moment while we type our passwords in, okay? What I want to do is, until they match, the submit button won't even be enabled, right? Right, until they actually match. So we can just, in the submit button right here, put disabled. And so now that submit button's not even usable, right? Now in the homework assignment you have coming up, there's more fields you have to deal with, but it's the same thing. You just have to scale it up for multiple things, okay? All right, so let's look at what we'll do now. Somewhere along the way, we have to make these event handlers, or event listeners, I should say, and then decide if they match, and then once they match, enable that button, okay? Notice here now, we did this a minute ago where we took this individual and we attached an event listener. Then we took this individual and attached an event listener. What if I have 10 fields? Then I have to attach an event listener to every field. I have to make 10 event listeners, right? There's got to be a better way.
There's got to be a better way.
So do you remember the keyword query select all? Yeah, we could select all of these with one line of code here. So I can actually say let inputs equal document.querySelector, query selector all. We want to get all of them, right? And then you just use your CSS style selectors. So what I want is, let's just be super specific here. I'm going to give this form an ID of main form. And then in here, I can say this, form, main form, then the children of it that are inputs, where their type, and that should be a single quote to make this easier. Yeah, where the type is text, or in the real program it would be password, right? But we're not using password. And then that, and that. That will give me all of the inputs. And it'll be an array in this inputs variable. So let's just make sure we see that. I'm going to console that out. Inputs. So this will just immediately display those in the console. Refresh. And there you can see this array here that has two things in it. It has input with the ID of password and one of that. Right, so and if I did another one here, let's do another field here, and we'll call it something else, 5, 6, whatever, and refresh, and here we go. That array is holding every single input, right? And it doesn't even have to have an ID, right? It could just be something like that. Right, it's type text, so I refresh it, and now we have this last one that's an input that doesn't have an ID, right? But that's just an array of all those input values. Right, so we can go back here and notice the submit button's not in there because I said specifically, yeah, that selector. That's a CSS selector. Anything you can do in CSS for a selector, you can put it in that query selector. Yeah. So if it's a valid CSS selector, then it'll work in there. All right, but we only want these two, okay? But now, all we've done is got an array that has them. We still have to attach an event listener to them, right? Well, we just loop through them, right? So we just do a for of loop. So for, and again, you can use whatever variable you want for this first one. I usually do the singular version of what the array is called. So input of inputs, and I just say input.add event listener. That's it. And then we put the parameters. And that'll add the event listener to every one of those. No curly braces are necessary here, but just for clarity. And of course, the function we're going to call is validate. And this time, let's use the input, right? Instead of key up. Either one works. Okay, so now we've got this nice function here, and we have this input. Each of these inputs have an event listener attached to them, so now they can all listen. All right. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is compare to see if they're matching each other, right? So inside of here, we can do that. We can just simply say, we can look at the, so we have the PW here and the CPW, right? So we want to grab those, and those are probably a good idea to make some variables here. So we'll say let password, or we'll go let pass equal document get element, right? The whole thing, and PW. And we'll do the same thing for confirm. Oh, that's a keyword. Nice. We'll say confirm password. Okay. Okay, so we got the two variables. Now I just need to see if they're the same as each other, basically, right? So we can do, well, we can do a couple things here. Let's start off with a basic if statement. So if pass dot inner or value, is equal to confirm pass value, and I need to change my equal sign there, I just noticed, to a double. That'll get you every time. Yeah, so if those two are equal, then there's a couple things we want to do, right? One thing we want to do is put the message up there, right? That says it's valid, right? So we can say, yeah, this guy right here, which is the message, is the ID. So let's go ahead and make a variable for that too. Let message equal that. msg.inner text equals, yay, they match. Something like that, right? Also, we want to change the class on that. So we'll say message.className. What was the, oh, valid, right? Okay. Okay, so now we have this, we can do the exact thing with an else statement here, right? Just say else, yeah, then we'll say passwords don't match or something like that, and the class is invalid. Okay, that's a start. Let's refresh. Unexpected or curly brace on line 21. Yep, overdid it there. So here we go, if we refresh it and we start typing, and we're not getting a message here, so let's look in the console. And we have uncaught reference, confirm pass is not defined. Let's look at that. And I have a typo right there on line 7. I wrote confirm pass instead of confirm pass right there. So that should fix that problem. Refresh. And now as I type, it's not matching and it's giving me the message A, B, C. But when I get over here, I start typing A, B. So when I hit C, poof, they match, right? Now we want to make that submit button available now at this point, right? That's actually easy to do. We come in here, this submit, let's give it an ID so we can target it. We'll say button or main button, okay? And this is actually just an attribute that we can look at, right? So if I come in here, or not an attribute, but a property of the DOM object. So if we go over here and refresh, right click, oh, it won't even let me right click on it. Nice. All right, we'll just come down here and do it then. So here I am on the right, clicking on submit. And then if I go to the properties here and look at this button and expand it, there's actually a disabled property right there. See it? And it's set to true at the moment. Okay, so we're going to set it to false. So it will no longer be disabled. So that's easy. Right here, we just say, yeah, and we'll make that a variable too. Might as well, button, document, get element. Got to get used to typing this thing, right? Main button. All right, so button dot disabled equals false. That's it. All right, so for our else statement, we just do this exact opposite here, right? set it here to true. And here we go. So if we refresh this and we start typing the password, Beavis, and then unconfirm, the submit button is not available yet, but then as soon as I hit the S, that should turn green and my submit button should be available, but it is not. So button dot disabled, let's double check that in the DOM here. Should, main button, let's look. Main button, oh, button, look at that. Nice catch. Okay, that's the good place to start. Check the ID to make sure it matches. All right, let's refresh it. Try it again. Beavis, B-E-A-V, as soon as I hit S, there we go. Submit button becomes available, okay? So what we just looked at here will help you with an upcoming homework assignment where you have to verify that the passwords match. I believe it's called relatively secure password or something like that. I think it's the last one in that bunch of password things, okay? So any questions about anything we looked at here for adding event listeners? You feeling okay about all that?